I'll come back once again, and embarking, like we earlier said, over the U.S.-Iranian file, and whether there is going to be an escalation or there is going to be a halt or a ceasefire, whether the negotiations are going to be taken seriously on the table. And there are many routes that would take the two parts to different destinations, but until this very moment, nothing has been taken seriously. And over this particular important topic, we're very delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Ayman Salah Murad, Professor of International Law and member of Egyptian Council of Foreign Affairs. Good morning, Dr. Ayman.
Good morning.
How are you doing, sir?
Fine.
Almost 90 days of war now. The limits of the American military power in dealing with Iran, has it been one of, the appealing topics or the appealing points to be discussed or noticed by the observers? Or how could the political observers assess those 90 days of military confrontation between the two parts?
Actually, since military operations started in February 28th, the military operations took like 40 days, like 38 or 40 days, and then a ceasefire took place between U.S., Israel, and Iran. And on that ceasefire, it was pretended to start a negotiation to settle differences between U.S. and Iran, especially the nuclear program, besides the ballistic missile program and the Iran proxies. Now what happened that the Strait of Hormuz entered the arena as another paper, and we are seeing going forth and back between Trump and Iran about the point. They sometimes they agree, sometimes they disagree. And we are looking forward for the final results of negotiations, although Trump has declared that if Iran does not agree on the points proposed by the U.S., mainly the nuclear program and the 450 kilograms of highly nuclear amount, they might return back to military operations. Hopefully that might not happen.
Why you think that did military confrontation or the military pressure in general fail in achieving the objects or objectives of the American side?
Because the war at the very beginning, the U.S. did not study the Iranian side enough study before getting into military action. You know that Israel has used its leverage on the U.S. to provoke the U.S. to start the war. But as you know, Iran is a theocratic country. The geography of Iran, let's say, the other countries that are in a way supporting Iran, the history of Iran in the region and its history of prolonged negotiations. So at the first, the U.S. thought that they might achieve decisive victory through, let's say, falling the regime and getting the regime down, which did not happen even when they struck the first three top generations of leading in Iran. But we saw another generation that took the lead. And I think that the studies were not precise, the studies were not accurate, and a lot of political analysts, I would say that they proposed this end before the war started because it hasn't been enough study on the nature of Iran. And if you look at the negotiations on 2015, which was called the Comprehensive Plan, or 5+1, it took 12 years. It took 12 years to reach to a comprehensive plan or kind of negotiation. So how can the U.S. think that in 2 months or 3 months or some days they can settle this issue down? So I think there have been some miscalculations of the military operations at the beginning of the operation.
Right. There was a very obvious controversy on the side of the U.S. administration ever since this war started. the objectives of this war that changed by time, from the nuclear enrichment and the nuclear activities to the Strait of Hormuz, to the toppling of the regime. Nothing was obvious when it came to the U.S. objectives. So how do you assess those objectives, and where how far the U.S. have achieved any of them until this very moment?
If we look at the main objectives of the war, it was first toppling the regime, two, let's say, declining or getting Iran to give up on the nuclear program, three, getting Iran to get rid of the long-range ballistic weapons or rockets, four, was the proxies of Iran. And if we look at these four main objectives, nothing has been achieved. Nevertheless, another objective has been added, which is the Strait of Hormuz. So now, nothing of these objectives has been completely resolved. But we got into another square, which was not in the calculations at the beginning of the war, which is Strait of Hormuz. So I think that even the U.S. Senate has declared this in one of its summits, and recently they curbed, they made some decisions on curbing the war, because you know the law of 60 days. The command-in-chief, who's Trump, can go to a war without taking permission of the Senate only for 60 days. After these 60 days, whether he has to stop the war or to take the agreement of the Senate. Nothing happened, and he stopped the war at 40 days, and then we had listened to some declaration from Hexas, the Minister of War, that the new operation will be a new operation or a new war. So now we didn't exceed 60 days. So I see actually kind of a problem or dilemma in the American administration itself in dealing with the war, and we see also Iran is not keen to cooperate in these files, as we all see. So hopefully things can get better.
So Iran, even through this war, have reflected an image that nobody have really imagined or assessed. People used to assess Iran as on a certain image, and as a result of this military confrontation and the negotiations and the unfolding events later on, Iran just reflected the real image of that nation. You kindly talked about some of the aspects of that image and some of the features of the Iranian culture and the Iranian policies and all that. How do you assess the Iranian image as a nation and its strength, political strength, military strength, nuclear strength?
Actually, if we look on the Iranian image, I think also that things changed. First, when Iran launched its assault on Arabian Gulf countries, this was, I would say, a historic mistake, because it's not allowed for any country to attack other countries that are not directly engaged in the war, and even Egypt condemned any attacks on the Gulf countries, and we have seen like recent attacks on Kuwait and Bahrain, and of course definitely we condemn these attacks on Arab countries, because the Arab national security is an extension for the Egyptian national security. This is number one. Number two, for the other images, first, if we look for the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has always said that it might use this kind of paper or card in its war, and it never happened. But this time it happened, and we have seen that this is kind of, let's say, getting away from international law and international norms, because this led to an economic crisis in the whole world, and this is against international law to control international strait, which the international law says that it is used by transit passage. This is the law. So we saw that Iran has also made some contraventions or infringements for the international law, and for the political scene in Iran and the military scene in Iran. I think also things had changed. Also, Iran is a stubborn counterpart to the U.S. But it's not that what all people have thought before the war, because Iran has always made a bigger figure for its military power and its military strength. But we have seen that the real story is kind of different. Although it is a stubborn, let's say, counterpart for the U.S., aided by its its geographic location, its geographic nature by the countries that are helping Iran. And we also condemn the attacks from the very beginning, the U.S. attacks and Israel attacks on Iran from the very beginnings. And Egypt even condemned, declares that we condemn any kind of unfair use of military power against any country, So yes, things change. Things change definitely, of course.
Right. The Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz have changed or reshaped the scene, the situation entirely, and suddenly it emerged as one of the main leading points or leading objectives for the United States and also for Iran. How did this happen, and how exactly could it be sorted out?
Actually, from the very beginning, there is a big question. How did the U.S. Did not think that might took place, that due to the conflict, Iran might close the regime, the Strait of Hormuz. So I think this is kind of also miscalculation, because this is something which is expected. Now Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, so the U.S. forces has made and let's say it closed the outer part of the strait. So now we have double layers enclosure of the strait, which endangers the whole economic situation, and it moved the conflict from a square, which is the nuclear file and ballistic file, to another square, which is the Strait of Hormuz. Now Iran says that it wants the opening of the Strait of Hormuz in opposition to or in front of the stop of or cease of fire. Now, if they open the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. seized the fire, so now we are back again to square number one. So nothing has been achieved, and that's what we have been all saying. And Egypt has always asserted that military actions are not always solutions. It let's say it entangles the problem. And even the U.S., the Senate and the people in the U.S. said that. You know that Trump now is waiting for midterm elections in the Senate. Time is against the U.S. But they are saying that Pakistan is exerting big effort to try to negotiate between the two parties. President Trump yesterday said that in a week things might get better. And all the settlers say the best way is to make this agreement on phases, on intervals. Let's say, as they say, ceasefire and opening Strait of Hormuz for 60 days, and in these 60 days they can negotiate on other files. I think this is kind of a good solution that might help to get the situation into a better situation.
Right. On that note, of course, Dr. Ayman Salah Murad, Professor of International Law and member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, thank you so much for talking to us on the Breakfast Show. And now, more details in this following report over the same topic.
The current